What's up, y'all? I got another horror dubstep tutorial for you, and this one I wanted to break down the sustain bass from my track that I just released as part of the Hereditary EP, Liftoff Pandemonium. And so it is a Tearout slash drum step type deal. I'll go ahead and play that, and then I'll show you what we're going to be breaking down. So here we go. And so we're going to be breaking down the sub patch and a couple of the layers with that. They sound like this. So the first thing that I brought in here was this Glitch Rage Wavetable. It's in my Wavetable presets that are in the description if you need the link to that. It sounds like this. And so I basically have this first LFO set to off, which means it's going to stay at that peak instead of doing the movement forever. It just goes to the peak and stays there. So it kind of just cycles through that. And then this envelope here raises the pitch, so it goes from the bottom, right? So 33.39 semitones down up to the pitch that it starts at. So I've pitched this down 3 octaves. And then I add in this modulation wavetable here, which is a sine square. I'm just kind of using the sine wave there, and the levels on that are way down. And then it's up 0.6 semitones. And so what I did here was I linked this wavetable to frequency shift the Glitch Rage wavetable there. And then I have this phase mod here that turns up the amount of modulation that it's doing there. So that links to that, as you can see. Then I added a distortion, and every other modulation in here other than the pitch rise is all linked to this, just so you don't have to kind of look around for that. So I have a distortion that the drive's being turned down on. It's a hard clipper. Then I have this notch filter that's sweeping up pretty quickly. Then a peak filter also going up pretty quickly. Then another peak filter kind of going down on that one. And then I have a distortion, sine distortion, that makes it really noisy and messy. In that one, the drive is being increased as it goes. And then I have this analog layer that you almost can't hear, but once you turn these off, you can hear it's pitched down 5 semitones and up, so that's really actually the same as being up 7 semitones, because it's down 5, which is the perfect fifth an octave down, except for now I've pitched it back up that octave. So that's the frequencies that it's adding in there. And you can just barely hear it in the background now. And then I have lastly another notch filter sweeping down through there just to kind of give it like a throaty vibe. So then going into my effects lane, I have a distortion with a little bit of bias, making it dirtier. A disperser that doesn't feel like it's doing too much at the moment. Then I add a chorus, and as you can see, that's my first width effect. So no width before that chorus. Then I have another disperser. And so we'll show the last chorus first. So now it's getting this really nice throaty sound to it. And part of that you couldn't really tell before was these 2 dispersers. So without them, and then with them, it just kind of, so whenever you have a disperser on something, it tends to add like a little bit, it's an all pass filter, so it messes with the phase of it a lot. And if you ever like sweep a sine wave down through a disperser, you'll see that like the pitches get shifted back at whatever point this hump is at. It's just taking all of this filter modulation that we've done here and kind of like giving some length to it in the spectrum. So then I add another disperser and then a slice EQ. And so this EQ is really just cleaning it up a lot, adding a little bit, taking the bottom completely out of it. Right, so now we just have that mid and that high. 3-band EQ where this band is being pushed downwards. I'd probably even push that a little further, actually. Yeah, that's better. And then a bit crusher. that kind of just dirties the top end of it up. It's not doing too much to this sound. So the first thing that I did was I took this, played the note that I had in my project, which is a C sharp, and rendered it to a couple different samples. So I had the original one, render one of those, change the phase modulation, render one of those, and then you can go in here, and this is the really cool thing with the patch like this, is you can just kind of cycle through the waveforms. And just get different sounds really quickly and easily by just changing your waveform, because so much happens after this wavetable that the small change on the input has an exponential difference in the output of the sound. If you get too many effects, it will kind of make it all sound kind of samey, which this one does. It's just giving us a different tone of the same sound in a way. So I took that, rendered a couple little samples here. And so that was the 4 that I rendered out of that. And then the next thing that I did here, I know y'all been wanting some Harmor tutorials, and this one is not going to do Harmor justice, so just know I'm going to do more of those in the future. But there's this really cool section in here called the Image Resynthesis section. And so what this does, most synths that have a sample section, like Serum, are more the deal where you can take it, put it in, and it treats it like a sample. Whoops. Gotta turn it on. Right. It's just playing it at different pitches. So it's literally just playing the audio in there. Whereas with the Harmor Resynthesis, you can take it. This one's in D, so I need to go in here and change my root pitch of this. And now it's playing at the proper C sharp instead of, if it's here, that's actually 1, 2. That's actually playing an E, I think. So I have that, and it's recreating the sound based off of the frequencies that are represented, that Harmor really quickly has an algorithm that does that or whatever. So then using this, the only thing that I actually did in my 2 copies of this here, right? I have 2 different ones. That one and that one. The only thing that I did to change them was go into the effects slot, because it is mono, like my original patch here. I haven't added any effects to it, and it's mono. So I went in here and just turned the chorus on. I used classic and just turned this down. So now we have it basically playing that. Don't ask me why I used Harmor for this. That's just what I did. And the sound, it sounds like that in the track. So that's how exactly I got the sound that I used. If you're just playing it in here, well, I've changed the sound now, but if you were to just play it in there, you would have a slightly different sound, and it's almost actually going to be, this one's going to sound a little more organic, whereas the other one, depending on how you use it, like if you just use what I did, it's going to almost be a little more standardized, because this one's playing the same frequencies, just pitched up and down, whereas the other one is doing different things to the sound based off of how the filters move at the different frequencies based off the input. I know I'm talking really fast, but like this is going to be such a long tutorial if I don't pack in information, so sorry for that. It's not really that important, the stuff that I've just said anyway, so more of an understanding thing that doesn't help you make better music. It just, you know, helps you not ask so many questions while you're working. So from there, I used those 2, and I think that's, you know, that should be where I'm at now with this. Let me turn these off. Yeah. Right now, so we have a switch here, and the way that I accomplished that was by using both the different patches. So this is my first patch. Then I switched to my second patch for the sustains here. And I'd say the second one is a little bit more high energy, so it helps to go from low to high. That's a good way to keep your track interesting. You can do high to low though too. It's just a different feel. I feel like high to low is like cooler feeling, whereas low to high is like aggressive feeling. That's just my ear though. And then I've gone in here and done a little bit of layering with this. So I have this big dirty air sound. And I don't have the exact patches for this because I did this project a long time ago, but I do have something close that I just kind of whipped together really quick. And that is using the same principles, but not the exact same execution here. So I use this like Ravy saw layer. So it's a square wave sub, a 16 layer saw, and then a 15 layer detuned saw, again with the sync turned up times 3, so it's at the perfect fifth and an octave up. Mix them together. I got a little noise going here, and then I'm going to send them through a reverb. Actually, we'll do the reverb last. So then I'm going to send them first through the reverb, but I'll show you the next parts first. So I did some interesting filtering just to get them to sound a little different. So I've done weird filtering here. I have a speaker, which if I add these in one at a time, have the saw. The speaker kind of just gives it an interesting stereo profile. Right? You see that versus that. And then we are going to go in and change the mix on this so that we don't lose that top end. Then I'm going to put a phasing filter on there, which gives it some interesting stuff. The resonance is a little heavy, so I'm going to turn the mix down. And then I'll do a vowel filter. More interesting tones. I might turn the mix down on this too. Yeah, and then I'll do a high pass 24. Maybe a little less. High pass 12. That feels better to me. I'll show the rest first, just so we're not having to like wait for tails to decay out. But just know, all this would happen after the reverb. So I have an OTT with the shortest time, highest depth. Kind of push these two to where you want them to sit. And then a distortion, because my original sound was called Big Dirty Air. So I'm assuming I distorted that. And so then the first thing that I would have set up on this when I made this sound was a reverb with a super long tail, right? We'll go as long as it can go. The least dampness that I can have, because that's going to make it kind of fade the high end down on the reverb. I don't want that to happen. And then the high cut is completely off. So then I can play a note, and I'll go ahead and turn my Edison on here. I can play a note. And I'll say that's long enough. And so then we have this sound that is just really a long reverb tail that we can use as a sample layer. So then I take this, pop it in here. We played a C sharp, so I have to change this. And then I'm going to go in and change my envelope so that it sustains and then changes with whatever note I'm playing and doesn't decay out super long. So that's how you would make something like this. All right, and so moving on forward, I'll go ahead and play everything together again. So I brought in another layer here with this little stuttery section, which I'll talk about the composition on this in a second. But this stuttery layer is just basically, let me play it first. Just an FM saw with like really interesting distortion on it. So I don't have the patch for this because this is from an old project. But it's something like this. Take one oscillator, A, FM it from B, 2 saws. Then I have just a 32 rate, 64, whatever you want to do on the level. And then if you send that into a really heavy distortion, like let's rectify it, we get quite an interesting sound that kind of interacts with the detuning. Right, if you spread the detune wide enough, it kind of pops around frequency-wise. So that's how you would make that patch. I'm sorry I don't have the original one. So from there, let's jump into talking about some of the compositional stuff with this one. I've kind of already covered the first half, so we'll just play this through, really. right? So I'm going the main synth and then these little boppy Tearout hits and then like a scary filler. So bouncing back and forth between those two. And as you can see, my sub here is moving all over the place, right? It's going dum 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 dum, right? Moving kind of all over the place. We're going through these couple of notes right here. And then I switch to the longer sustains. And then bring in some different drums here. Man, I love that part so much. And so the way that I did this, I guess I'll have to explain the sub next, but the way that I did this here was moving from spot to spot while the sub bounces up and down. So we have a couple layers again, or it's the same layers. Right, so that huge just goes D, C sharp, C sharp, C sharp in a dotted configuration, but with only half or quarter notes. So I leave that little eighth note space between each of these, and that's for the sub to pop upwards on. So, and as you can see, it pitch bends in between each of those notes. The glide is on 41, set to always. Show this real quick, just in case you don't have big speakers to listen on. So it's kind of popping, you know, back and forth between those. So for each of the parts that are the low sub, it plays the synths. And then on each of the parts that are the high sub bend, plays another one of these little distorted horror effects, right? So keeping it moving, then we move on into more long sustains. And then kind of fades into the next part. So lastly, I'll talk about the sub patch. And I'm going to leave the effects on just to make this a little bit quicker. Okay, so I start out with my analog sine wave sub root note, and it's making all that noise because of the effects that are on it. But just know that's a sub root note. The level's up 200%. And then before that, I have this analog bandpass saw wave, which just does a nice little frequency sweep on this bottom end, right? This is without any of that. I have this envelope affecting the filter, sweeping through those frequencies. Put my sub back on it, my fundamental. Run it through the disperser distortion with a little bit of mix there. And then another disperser as far as post effects. And then a destructor. And I've explained this a couple times, but I'll go through it really quickly. So when you're using this abrasive module or whatever of destructor, you have this preamp, the gate threshold, and the post gain. Basically these all work together. So like the preamp, once you send this high enough that it's passing this gate threshold, right? So it adds noise. I'll turn the wetness all the way up, right? So if I bring this gate threshold up, nothing happens because it's not passing it. Still not passing, not passing, not passing, right? Now it's barely passing right here. And then the further it passes it, the more distortion it's adding. I have this filter means that it's band passing it. It's band passing my noise. It's, you know, turned up pretty high, but I could turn it down. Right? Bring it back up. And then you turn the dry wet down a little bit just to let that initial sub back through. So that's how I get the fuzziness on the sub. And then another speaker on this, which again is giving it, actually in this case it's actually bringing the low mids and this band right here up. It's not adding any kind of stereo modulation to this. So then I send it through an EQ, boosting that same band again, that low mid band, trying to get that nice funky sub sound out of it. Send it through an OTT. I brought the out gain down a lot, so this is where my gain staging happens, and then just send it through. Pretty standard compressor. So the sub makes a big difference in this because let's say we just turn all of this off and have this be instead just a plain clean sine wave sub with relatively the same loudness. We'll try and get it to the same loudness of -9. Just bring this up. So that's even louder than it was, and I'll play it in context with my track, and you'll notice it sucks a lot more. Right, it just sounds way less meaner than the original sub. Right, does that sub not sound way meaner? I know that's got the mastering and everything on it, so it's kind of messing it up, but to me, that low mid band makes a big difference in like the tone and angriness and movement of your sub that keeps it from just sounding like a static, you know, layer to a sound. And then I also just do a real quick second version of this sub that the only difference is I'm gating this the amp envelopes on these, so it's more of a hit than a sustain. And with that, that's gonna do it for this one, y'all. And so with that, I think I'm gonna end this one. If you made it to this point, thank you for watching this far. I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm gonna be giving away the sub, the effects rack, right? This channel preset. So you can get the exact sub sound out of this as long as you have all the plugins you need. If you need to replace the compressor, just do any compressor and like push it down, you know, that's really it for that. And then I'm also, since I have it, I'm gonna do the sustain bass preset, and also I'm gonna be giving the samples that went along with this. So those couple of bass samples, so you have the exact sounds that I had to do this one. And thank you for watching to this point. Happy Halloween, and I will see y'all in the next one.